is committed to becoming climate neutral by 2050. We all agree on the direction of travel, but we're not all starting from the same place. The more closely we look at the big picture, the more obvious it becomes. To deliver on a Green Deal promises, we need to start with the different impacts climate change and climate action have on women and men. We need to listen to the voices of millions of Europeans and change the way we all live and work to ensure that no one is left behind. The Green Deal offers a once-in-a-generation opportunity to explore radical solutions that cut carbon and at the same time improve gender equality. So let's build the future we all want to see together.
Hello and welcome to the European Institute for Gender Equality's second and final part of its webinar series based on this year's Gender Equality Index thematic focus on the socially fair transition of the European Green Deal. My name is Georgie Bradley. I'm the Communications and Media Officer at IGA and I'll be moderating today's webinar. If you were with us last week, welcome back. Lovely to have you with us. If this is your first time joining, you can play catch up on IGA's YouTube channel where you can watch the first episode of the webinar series, which looks at how we can move towards a green and gender equal transport. Today we are switching gears a little bit, but still staying within the core priority areas of the Green Deal and looking at energy, specifically how we can move towards green and gender equal energy transition. So that means that we need to take one big step back first though and look at the overarching aim and goal, which is to reach climate neutrality as a continent by 2050. Which means that we are doing a lot to prepare and adjust to this new reality because there are a lot of innovative energy solutions being developed at the moment, and I'm sure on some level we're all trying our best to learn the ropes to be more energy efficient. But this access to information and indeed these tangible solutions, it's not a given for everybody, but it should be a right. Therefore, in the interest of not leaving anybody behind in the energy transition, we really need to identify where the gender gaps currently exist in the system, as it were, alongside other inequalities on the axis of social difference, such as age, income, disability, or migrant status, to name a few. So with this as a guiding principle, we're going to be looking at the policies at the moment in the pipeline related to energy in the Green Deal and how they can be further enhanced and strengthened so that in the energy transition, it is accessible and affordable to everybody. And off the back of that, we are inevitably going to be looking at energy poverty and how women and men are impacted very differently, not least communities who face additional barriers and vulnerability. So we want to be able to meet their needs along the way by reaching them in the first place and then engaging with them. And then from the workforce side, we're going to look at how we can further empower women to enter the energy sector through targeted measures and actions so that we get that all-important, diverse and nuanced perspective. And then peppered along the way, we have a number of promising practices that are paving the way for change, which we can reflect on and build upon. One logistical note before we begin, on the right-hand side of your live stream, you'll see the Slido function, where you can pop your questions in, which we will hope to answer during the live discussion. If we don't, however, we will try to answer all the questions and then publish them on IGA's website. That's also true for links and publications and resources that are mentioned either in the live discussion or in presentations. They will also be published on our website. So we begin by looking at where women stand in the green energy transition and why a gender perspective is needed to not only accelerate the progress, but also the process itself. So I hand you over to Blondine Mollard and Annabelle Filsrud, who are from IGA's Research and Indices team. Go ahead.
Thank you, Georgie. It's really a pleasure to meet again and to share with you another aspect of our analysis for the Gender Equality Index 2023. Today we are discussing why the green transition in energy needs a gender perspective. Annabelle and I will talk you through the following aspects of the evidence that you will find in the thematic focus. First of all, why is energy key to the European Green Deal and what does gender equality has to do with it? Then, gender role in energy use and energy poverty in the EU, the representation of women in decision making, and on the position of women and men on the labor market in the energy sector. And finally, based on data and evidence, what are the main steps that we need to accelerate the green transition from a gender and intersectional perspective? So, as you said, the European Green Deal has set the EU on a path to carbon neutrality by 2050. This transformative goal will have effects on every aspect of our societies, but especially on the way we produce and consume energy. Why? Because energy production and use represent more than 75% of the EU's carbon emission at the moment. And from that perspective, energy transition is key to achieving the goal of reducing our emissions. And to meet those goals, we need an overall decrease of how much energy we consume, alongside greater energy efficiency and a higher share of energy coming from renewable sources. At the moment, 28% of the final energy consumption in the EU relates to residential energy consumption. So the way we consume energy in our homes, in terms of heating or electrical appliances. So from that perspective, it does make sense to look at individual behaviors and how gender norms and gender roles, for example, may affect the way we relate to energy, the way we consume it, the way we save it, and the way we invest in energy efficient investment. Passing now the floor to Annabelle to show us and discuss how gender roles affect the way we relate to energy.
Indeed, Blandine. Reducing energy consumption is a significant part of the climate-related energy goals. That's why we also focus on households and individuals. Generally, reducing a residential energy consumption is addressed either through initiative to change energy use at home or through renovation programs targeting increased energy efficiency in buildings. Energy efficiency behavior can influence overall energy consumption. Households' decisions on energy-related investments are shaped by, for example, demographics, housing characteristics, place of residence, beliefs of return on investment, expectations, as well as social and policy factors. With a persistent gendered income gap, more women than men live in poverty, and therefore there's also that's also quite likely that women have more limited options to invest in energy efficiency. When we talk about energy use, data and evidence seems to suggest that men tend to spend more of their energy on leisure activities, while women's energy expenditure relates mostly to household work. Likewise, general evidence seems to suggest that women practice more energy curtailing behaviors, using less electricity, for example, for energy intensive household activities such as cooking or laundry, while men tend to also take more action to make energy efficiency investments. This is based on Eurobarometer data of 2019, where we see that more people across the board make a low-cost energy efficiency investment, which is of course quite logical since it's more low cost rather than high cost. And across the board, we can see that men make more energy efficiency investments, where the biggest gender gaps can be found in the high-cost energy efficiency investment on, for example, insulating homes, and also investing in a low-fuel car. There's quite a significant thing is where we see that there's one action in which actually women perform them more than men in a lower cost energy efficiency investment, which is investing in more energy efficient household appliances. So, The green transition promotes not only the overall reduction of energy consumption, but also the need for more flexible energy use. This is called load shifting, through modification of energy use in time, space, and intensity. This is especially important moving towards more renewable sources of energy, such as wind and solar power, to manage the demand during peak hours and to not damage or overload the grid. However, load shifting can result in an increased mental burden because it takes anticipation, planning, and coordination of various household tasks and activities. Due to the uneven care burden and housework burden, this has important gender implications and complicates the process of reconciling paid work with care responsibilities and household activities. Of course, if we speak about households and energy consumption, we cannot not speak about energy poverty and the challenges related to the green transition of the cost of living crisis. Much has been said about this specific type of poverty, but discussions often fail to capture how different groups experience this type of poverty differently and how there are differentiated risks to energy poverty. Often we're not going further than recognizing that there are certain vulnerable households and vulnerable consumers. However, there's good news. The energy poverty has risen in prominence on the political research and policy agenda, with a common EU definition being posed in the Energy Efficiency Directive and efforts to define, measure and tackle this at all levels. Within the index and the thematic focus, we have looked at energy poverty alongside the perspective of 3 indicators, namely the inability to keep the house adequately warm, the share of women and men having arrears on utility bills, and also the share of women and men living in poor quality dwellings. Of course, those are not the only relevant factors. We have the sex disaggregated data, but we have also looked at social characteristics such as age, educational attainment, household composition, whether someone is born within the EU or outside the EU, and disability. Looking at these perspectives, looking from the perspective of these 3 indicators, the data shows an interesting, daunting, but very useful picture on populations who might be more at risk for energy poverty. Lone parents, people with disabilities, people born outside the EU, and those with lower educational attainment are most likely to be unable to keep their house adequately warm. Likewise, 13% of women and 11% of men among single parents have arrears on their utility bills. This is against 6% of the general population in this data. Also, 22% and 90% of men among single parents live in poor quality dwellings. For non-EU migrants, this is 21% for both men and women, and this is against 15% of the general population. Concluding on energy poverty, we see among some groups that there's a higher share of people having trouble keeping their house adequately warm, have arrears on utility bills, and live in poor quality dwellings. Beside gender, age, foreign-born status are important intersecting inequalities, and we need to keep them in mind. However, when we only speak about vulnerable citizens or vulnerable households, we fail to see the specificity of the problem, and this might impede also targeted action. To gain the knowledge and to take this targeted action, we need to make sure that diagnosing the problem of energy poverty within the EU is looked at through a gender and intersecting inequalities perspective, and that measures targeting this, such as the Social Climate Fund that will be enforced from 2026, addresses also this problem from a gender and intersecting inequalities perspective. For example, by asking member states to include it in their plans for that fund. So indeed, there are still steps to take to combating energy poverty related problems, as well as the green energy transition and policies. But who makes the decisions about the future of the energy sector and those policies? Looking at the energy sector, a few data points as EIGE's statistical brief on the gender balance in the areas of the European Green Deal paints the following picture. In the overall areas of the European Green Deal, the top position in the Commission are gender balanced. Also, if we look at energy specifically, since 2019, the Commission for Energy has been a woman. If we look at Parliament, looking at the main committee dealing with energy-related issues, namely the Industry, Research and Energy Committee, 41% of its members are women in 2022. If we zoom in on member states level, 43% of senior ministers with responsibility for energy were women in the EU member states. This is actually quite a positive number, as it is in the gender balance zone, and better than and higher than the 32% of senior ministers across all European Green Deal areas. In national parliamentary committees working on energy, 29% were women in 2022, slightly lower than women's overall representation in parliament. Thus, in some spaces we see that we're moving toward gender balance, but sustained political will for women's representation in energy-related decision-making is needed, especially in national parliament, but also taking into account the growing relevance of energy communities and energy cooperatives on a local level. And while women's representation is paramount, applying an integral gender and intersecting inequalities perspective to energy-related policies is also needed. I will hand back the floor to my colleague Blandine.
Thank you very much, Annabelle. And indeed, if there is definitely some progress happening in terms of decision-making, when it comes to the representation of women in the labor market, in the actual workforce of the energy sector, the picture is still very contrasted. Overall, 24% of employees in the EU energy sector are women. So we are very far from the gender balance zone. And overall, this picture, this overall figure masks considerable variation across the countries and across the sectors, the subsectors of the energy sector. For example, the coal mining subsector is the one who is experiencing the most rapid transition at the moment, but it's also the one where women are the most severely underrepresented, with only 12% of employees being women. In the renewable energy sector, while we only have global estimates, no specific reliable EU data, there are some indications that the share of women is a little bit higher than in the conventional energy sector, with 32% share of women estimated, again at the global level. The energy sector really represents a tremendous opportunity to increase the inclusivity of the workforce in the energy, so to increase the share of women at every level. But however, for the job creation in the energy sector to benefit women and men equally, we need first to address certain bottlenecks that have been holding women back, especially gender segregation, both in terms of occupations and in terms of level of responsibility, but also gender biases in the working culture and disparities in pay. So moving on from this data, what are the steps exactly that we need to take to foster the gender sensitivity of the energy policies in terms of the Green Deal? So first of all, we need to follow through in terms of the implementation of the energy policies under the Green Deal, while addressing the underlying inequalities based on gender and other intersectional factors to ensure that the transition to a low-carbon society is socially fair, not to recreate or aggravate existing inequalities. Second, we need to step up the effort to adopt gender-responsive policies, programs, and data collection efforts to make sure the transition works for everyone. Finally, there are already some really promising upcoming opportunities for us to increase the gender responsiveness of those policies. I just want to name two. At the moment, countries are working on updating their national plans for energy and climate. Those are the national roadmaps to meet the EU climate goals. Those plans are a perfect opportunity to address some of the challenges we just mentioned in terms of gender segregation, in terms of underrepresentation of women, in terms of vulnerability to energy poverty. So this is something that we call on EU governments to really look into those aspects when they work on those plans. Another opportunity that is very concrete and that is also very promising is the fact that the EU has raised its own already ambitious target for the production of energy from renewable sources. By 2030, 42.5% of all the energy produced in the EU will have to come from renewable sources. This is a tremendous opportunity for job creation. And it's very ambitious. So this goal will need all the skills, all the talents that we can get. And this is an opportunity for women to invest this sector even more. In EIGE, we have also developed our 3 Steps Forward campaign that we really encourage you to look into and to take your own personal pledge into how you are pushing for the green transition in your own life, in your own work. That's all for us in terms of data and evidence, and we're looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Blandine and Annabelle, for laying the foundations on why enhancing gender equality in the energy sector can lead to better outcomes for people, for our economies, our societies, and indeed the planet. But those outcomes are only as good as what you put into them. So I want to connect a few dots between this year's Gender Equality Index and the thematic focus. So this year, we have found that in the area of work, which is one of the domains that EIGE measures the state of gender equality in, we see rather alarmingly that there is gender segregation in the labour market that is as stagnated today as it was 10 years ago when the index was first launched. And in the last 10 years, there's been so much change. I mean, the pandemic was one of the biggest punctuations of change that there ever has been, at least in my lifetime, maybe your lifetime as well. But in this last 10-year period, specifically as well, in the last couple of years, there's been such an opportunity for the digital and green transition to upskill and reskill women as much as men. But we're not seeing that because, as you mentioned, there are bottlenecks. So what can be done to improve the state of affairs?
Yes, indeed. It's one of the takeaways of the Gender Equality Index this year. We've seen a lot of progress when it comes to the domain of power, for example, in terms of political representation of women in the political sphere and the economic sphere as well. This is also powered through by legislation and active really reforms to try to introduce quotas, for example. But we are not seeing the same level of progress when it comes to gender segregation. It's one of the most stubborn form of gender inequalities that we see in the EU. But what do we mean exactly? We mean the fact that women and men work in different sectors. To give you just one example, for every man that works in education, health, or care, there are 4 women. So the imbalance is very clear and it's just not moving. So this also means that the flip side of this is that women are still very much to this day underrepresented in STEM, so in all the fields of science, technology and math. And this is really a bottleneck for the green transition because most of the job creation that we are seeing at the moment is requiring those skills related to STEM. There was a report coming out recently from Spain that estimated that over the past 7 years, most of the, out of all the jobs created in the energy transition, 34% of those jobs went to women. So we are very far from a green transition that creates jobs for everyone because of this gender segregation. So this is really something that needs to be tackled urgently, and that is a little bit under the radar of gender equality policies, unfortunately.
Yeah, and as you say, it's not just, it's like horizontal and vertical as well, so it's like trying to improve matters in many different angles. And speaking of angles, I want to now broaden the discussion and bring in diverse perspectives and insights from some external speakers. So we will be joined by Juliana Santos Valgren, who is the director of the European Anti-Poverty Network, as well as Miguel Macias Sequeira, who is a researcher at the EU Energy Poverty Advisory Hub in the Nova School for University of Lisbon, and also Agnieszka Spyridowicz, who is the head of business development in the Lower Silesian Hydrogen Valley. We are going into many different directions here. I can see some rich discourse coming our way, but with a quick interlude and then we go into the nitty-gritty. See you in a minute. And welcome back. We are here in our little webinar living room, as it's come to be affectionately known as. If you're just joining us, welcome. We are moving towards a green and gender equal energy transition, and we are joined now by our external experts. Hello and welcome. Lovely to see you all. So just to quickly recap on what Blandine and Annabelle had raised in their presentation, we looked at why energy is key to the European Green Deal, gender norms and roles affecting energy use, energy poverty and intersecting inequalities, and ways to look forward for gender equal clean energy transition. I would like to start off, Juliana, I want to start off by kind of stating the obvious, if you like, that climate change is affecting us all, but clearly not equally. I guess evidence shows that women are hardest hit, and not least groups who face additional barriers. Let's lay down some legislation first. Can you speak to energy poverty in terms of the EU gender equality strategy? Let's go from there.
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you so much for this invitation. I'm very happy to be with you today. Yes, when it comes to gender poverty and energy poverty, I think we cannot agree more than gender and poverty are both intertwined. They are both multi-dimensional issues, but also structural issues. So when you talk about inequalities, we cannot disassociate one from the other. We need to tackle both and other also protected characteristics of discrimination. Before talking about the gender strategy, I think it's also important to talk about the challenge that we have as the APN, for example, because our work is a constant struggle to bring more awareness about the gender blindness in social policies, but at the same time to bring more awareness about the socioeconomic absence in gender policies, and at the same time try to bridge both class and gender gaps in energy poverty. So it's an effort that never stops, and we have to be sure that we can cover all the aspects and all different policies. Policies are fragmented, but it doesn't prevent us to shed light of the other missing points and a lot other loopholes that any kind of specific policy is missing. You already mentioned, Georgie, about some of the figures, but when it comes to, in terms of labor integration of women, but it lets me try to remind you what we are in terms of gender poverty specifically. So we are seeing a disproportionate impact of poverty more in women than in men. So today we see 22% of women at risk of poverty, while we have 20% of men at risk of poverty across the 27 member states. But the majority of women are single or solo parents. They bear the burden of unpaid domestic work. They also are working in the formal care work. And as a consequence, the gender poverty or energy poverty is also directly linked to child poverty and gender poverty gap. So what we are also trying to see in this process is how we also can address the intergenerational burden of the transmission of poverty from one generation to the other. But when it comes to the gender equality per se, just to give an example of the title of the strategy is Thriving in a Gender Equal Economy. It's the title of the strategy. So what do we see in the strategy? We see actions to mainstream diversity, to have equal opportunity in the center, to make sure that women are economically independent. We mentioned about equal pay, equal access to finance, fair pension, care, and share burden. However, there is a blind spot there. You mentioned the question of labor market integration. We do not talk about in-work poverty. So this is also a specific point that we need to shed light, we need to give attention, because when you're talking about energy poverty and the resources that we have to tackle the energy crisis, the question of income is very important. So even you can still access the labor market, but we're not going to have the adequate wage or the sufficient income to be able to pay at the same time for your food and for your electricity bill. There is another loophole in the gender equality when it comes to have the data monitored by the European semester and the social scoreboard. So we talk about a lot of data because if you're not visible, you don't count. But there is only one indicator intersecting with gender and employment, which is employment gap. All the other indicators do not cover gender, and therefore women are invisible also in the evaluation European semester. So what we are a little bit concerned is how these indications for social protection can wider include women that are at risk of poverty, how they can also assess the impact of social transfers in poverty for poverty reduction, also the question of intersection discrimination with women who are also disabled, also the housing cost and the overburden, because we are also don't have any data on that, and also the unmet needs of families like medical care, education, and training level.
I mean, you've really listed a litany of challenges, but let's turn those into opportunities from the policy response perspective. What can be done to shape policies with a more intersectional approach? And could you kind of fine-tune and really explain what do we mean by having an intersectional approach, and what can we do to shape policies so that they are more intersectionally based?
I think it's a great question, Jordi. What is intersectional approach? Because for us, intersectional approach is a metaphor to address historical inequalities. It's a frame of work. It's a tool for change. So we all agree that it's important to bring the different dimensions of people across the spectrum when we're talking about individual discrimination. So it's really important to talk about gender, we talk about race, we talk about class, which are the three pillars of the intersection approach. Let's not forget that intersectionality comes from the critical race theory, and therefore race is also a component in that discussion. However, what is missing is a wider understanding that intersectionality should not only be based on the individual base, but also at the structural, the institutional, the historical, the systemic, and the cultural level. So it's where, when you go to the structural, to the systemic, to address their historical inequalities, is where many organizations are still not aligned in their understanding about the intersectional approach that we like to have in order to have a common effort to tackle energy poverty in cooperation as civil society organizations. So for us as APN, when you talk about intersectional approach is, of course, trying to understand the individual experience of people in the intersection of gender, class, poverty, race, migrant status, disability, LGBTI rights. It's very important. Gender identity is very important that we understand that, but it's also what are the common points to make sure that at the structural level, we're going to not leave anyone behind. And here, what is we are really let's say expecting to have a shift is really on the national plans, the national climate plans. I think there is a room for improvement there. I think there is a room to have target measures that are dedicated only for women in poverty. Let's not forget that we talk about a lot about gender positive action, but we talk less about class positive action. So to have more strategy in the national action plans, climate plans, that in which we could tackle both gender and socioeconomic issues would be a great way to address the intersectional gap in policies in the way they are addressed right now.
Juliana, I can really feel the pulse of your passion for the work that you do. It's inspiring. We're kind of all like nodding along here and sort of leading with you. Can you kind of continue in that vein and share with us some promising examples and practices that you can cite which are inspiring change?
Yes, I'd like to share with you two court cases. One that is still undergoing the European Court of Human Rights, the other one who already concluded. One is a group of Swiss women from the city of Bern. They decided to go to the European Court after the Swiss courts have declined their claim because their concern was that Switzerland is not giving us the right tools to address our climate needs for women at our age. So here was an example on how age and gender could be the kickoff, the starting point of intersectional discussions, and how justice should be transformative to address issues of energy and poverty. And what do they claim? They claim that the Swiss governments did not put adequate efforts to fight global warming, specifically for elderly women. So that was the case. When it came to the Swiss cause, they declined the request. They said that there is no data to prove that there was a disproportionate impact on elderly women to make that request, but they decided to go to the European Court, and they are joined by other 8 countries. They also agree that this is a strong pledge and this should be appreciated by the European Court. Another one is the case from Portugal. Although it's not only a complaint addressed by a group of women, but is led by a woman. And then she also it was a request also about how Portugal was not putting the good tools to address the question of green gas emissions for poor families or poor livelihoods, people living in areas where they had a lot of challenge in terms of housing. They also went to the European Court, and here it's again an intersectional approach of the question of discrimination, the prohibition of discrimination, and the question of gender, and also the question of age. So this is also a question on how they said that the younger woman would not survive or live enough or live longer enough to be able to live in a gas-free emission world like the Portuguese government was planning. So they also won this case at the European Court level, and this has become a reference, and this case was judged more or less 1 year ago. So I think it would be great that we start exploring examples throughout age, gender, poverty, discrimination based on socioeconomic characteristics to make the case and to address how this can be really a step towards change for women living in poverty.
I mean, these are examples of if you act, you might get. And your point about the fact that there wasn't enough data, but then there's enough kind of experience to kind of lead the charge for change, that really is something. It's not just about data, there's also anecdotal experiences, and you can become an expert by experience. Thank you so much, Juliana. These were some really diverse and really rich insights. Miguel, because now Juliana had mentioned Portugal, let's move over to you and bring in your work and insights. Your focus, among other areas, is on bringing a gender perspective to the vulnerabilities of the energy sector. And you are engaged in a number of energy-related projects. Can you speak to one of your projects on hard-to-reach energy users and start off by explaining to us what that means and what you do to reach the energy users who are hard to reach.
Yes, so hello, thank you for the invitation in the first place. So hard to reach energy users is a concept that has emerged in the literature of energy, of people that work with energy. And basically it derives a bit from what Juliana spoke before about the failures of policies. So policies are failing to engage with a relevant segment of the population. And we started to say that some people are hard to reach, even though we can also think that maybe the methods of reaching them are not the most appropriate. And this concept really includes a different set of energy users from the residential and non-residential sector. For example, here, the most relevant to our conversation today are vulnerable households, so energy poor households. But we can also think of the high-income households as hard to reach. So here, how do we make sure that energy efficiency policies reach the very rich, let's say, the people that have a lot of income and that can spend it on more consumption and have no interest in lowering their consumption. But going back to vulnerable households, this term usually is more used towards low-income households, households with low education levels, or households that are remote or very rural. We can also think about the term for multifamily households when we are thinking about specific installation, for example, of solar PV systems, and a range of other types of households where the combination of the gender gap is also very relevant. For example, elderly households. We know that they have more difficulty in accessing online information, and we also know that on average women live longer, so they are more likely to be to live alone and in elderly households, which then have a difficulty in participating in the energy transition. But we can also think about single parents, as was highlighted in the age index, which are mostly led by women, and that also face a range of vulnerabilities that can hinder them from participating in the energy transition. And what we see is that really across these axes of vulnerability, there is a tendency in most European countries for women to be, on average, harder to reach than men on energy topics. And something that was also mentioned in the presentation before are these cultural norms that place, let's say, the energy topics in the male domain. So when we are talking about installing boilers, installing solar PV, insulating a house, there's a cultural perception that this is a topic for men, and this can really difficult the participation of women in the energy transition. And even if we have adequate policies in line, they might not be able to take advantage of the support given because these topics are really out of the agenda.
So in terms of being inclusive in your community engagement, can you speak to some of the actions on a local scale to leverage on the energy transition? How do you ensure that that community engagement is inclusive?
So the Energy Poverty Advisory Hub, it has an atlas of local action mitigations of energy poverty with over 200 actions mapped. And the Energy Poverty Advisory Hub has also given support to local municipalities so that they can act on energy poverty. And we can look at some examples from Portugal, where we have been involved at our university. In 2020, so we were in the COVID-19 pandemic. It was a difficult time for everyone. And so we decided to create an online platform to give support on energy issues. So people that want to renovate their house, that want to change equipment, that want to change their energy behaviors, they can go to this platform and they have all the information on energy efficiency measures, but also on the financing schemes that exist on the national scale and also on the regulations. So, for example, saying that in some areas you cannot install solar PV systems, or you have to change your windows to a specific type of windows. so that people are more informed to take action. But what we also see through this project is that the people that go online for information are typically not the ones that really need support. So to be able to take this step of going online, people already have the idea of renovating their house. So it's not really a helpful tool to reach the hard to reach, let's say. And so later on, we moved on to physical support. So another project that we have in Portugal, in the Setúbal region of Portugal, which is a bit south of Lisbon. It's a mobile container, so that goes municipality to municipality and even within the same municipality. And in this container, there's a technician from the energy agency that is able to give support to anyone that goes there for free. So support on how to reduce energy bills, how to save energy, how to apply to funding schemes, how to be more comfortable in their houses. And this project in its pilot phase was in 3 municipalities in Portugal, and it reached 600 people. And interestingly enough, 55% of people that asked for support were women. So in here we actually had slightly more women than men reaching out for support on these topics. And I think that has a lot to do with the type of communication that was done. So the container was always placed in a central place of the neighborhood where people go by, for example, near a market or near a very busy street. It built a lot on local communication channels, local media, working with the local government, with local associations and groups of the neighborhoods. And it tried really to engage the whole community. For example, one service that was offered were free energy audits, so people could request these energy audits, and these were performed by people that lived in that community. So it was really an approach that tried to make it very easy and attractive to go ask support in energy issues. Even still, we noticed that for some people, asking for support, it's really still very difficult. And finally, I would like to mention another project that we also have in Lisbon, which is a renewable energy community. So a group of people from the neighborhoods coming together to invest and share in solar energy. So here with also the participation of the local government, of the local organizations, to place solar panels on a building and share it among the members. And for the first pilot project, we had around 22 members signed up. And in this case, it was only 41% women, so slightly more men than women. Maybe also because since it is a pilot project that requires investment and requires the installation of solar PV systems, maybe the people that are more interested in the first instance are the engineers, the people that work in the energy sector, that, as we saw in your presentation, are mostly men. And this project also builds a lot on participation in local events, collaboration with the local associations, be it parents association, residents association, and a lot also on just word of mouth between neighborhoods. So in these projects, what we are trying to do is really to reach the whole community and to work with the local middle actors, intermediaries that already know well the population and that can try to help us to reach the people that are harder to engage in these topics.
I want to lean into 2 aspects of what you just brought up, communication and behavioural change. So as we're trying to fine-tune our energy efficiency, this means modifying our behaviours, which at the best of times can be like moving a mountain. You know, we can get stuck in our ways, even if we are kind of mobilized with the right motivation because we know the how, the what and the why. But you mentioned that communication was key here. I want to know, what are some of the questions people ask and things they want to know when looking to switch to more renewable energy? And perhaps you can differentiate the type of questions from different people in different situations so that we have a kind of clearer understanding of who is asking what and why?
Yes, so communication is really key, as you said. And in the first instance, I think it's very relevant to acknowledge the testimonies of energy poverty that we received, so the lived experience. And this was the case of the project in Setúbal, the container where people went to ask for support. And the technician really had to have very good communication skills, often to interact with people that are in difficult situations, that are mentioned that they cannot afford to heat their houses, and to try to help them as much as possible. So, but some of the testimonies that we get when we interact on this level, on this scale with the community, really bring the energy poverty situation to a very real place. So it's not an abstract concept, it's really something that a lot of people are struggling with.
Sorry.
Also the same...
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry, I thought you finished it. Go ahead.
No. And also, I was going to say that people that reach out, usually they are interested on how to save on the energy bills. They want to know what type of equipment is better to install, what is more energy efficient, what can they do to have a more comfortable home. And it's also important to recognize here the role of the intermediaries that can act as a communication bridge to the population. And if we involve them in the beginning of the project, they can give us a very concrete picture of how we can later on rise up to the needs of the people, be it to improve energy efficiency or to install renewable energy. If we talk beforehand to the local community, to the people that are already active in the territory, they are fundamental to make these projects very much more successful than if we that are outside the community try to decide in our offices what is the best approach to engage with them and try to guess what they are going to ask us or what they are going to report. So this inclusive design from the beginning, it's maybe the message that I would like to leave now.
Inclusive and indeed customized, which is really great. Thank you so much, Miguel. Now we have an interlude from Lydia Zhivcic, who is a senior expert in Focus, which is an association for sustainable development based in Slovenia. She will speak to a project focused on energy poverty alleviation and improving the health of people affected by energy poverty in the coastal areas of the Mediterranean countries, with a particular focus on women. I like that we're going into the area of health. Let's go. Let's have a look.
Good afternoon. My name is Lydia Zhivcic and I'm coming from Focus Association for Sustainable Development based in Ljubljana, Slovenia. Until the end of August this year, I was the coordinator of Horizon 2020 project called Empowerment, about which I will talk today. The objective of Empowerment was to alleviate energy poverty with particular focus on health, Mediterranean area, and especially with focus on women. The focus on women was there because experience shows that women tend to be more affected by energy poverty than men, and are also a strong actor and viable force in tackling energy poverty. This is why we try to involve as many women as possible in our practical activities. In terms of practical activities to alleviate energy poverty, we did several different approaches. We used several different approaches. One approach was organizing collective assemblies. The concept of collective assemblies is that at a certain scheduled time, a group of people affected by energy poverty gathers together, and they actually work with each other to tackle their energy poverty issues, to help each other to overcome energy poverty by, for example, giving each other advice how to change a supplier with a cheaper one, how to save energy through energy saving measures, and so on. Then the second approach was conducting household visits, whereby energy auditors performed simple energy audits, and in this way identified where are the potentials in the household to save energy and also water, hence influencing the bills of the people, so reducing the energy and water bills of the people. The third approach was do-it-yourself approach. In this field, we had a series of activities from, for example, do-it-yourself reading of smart meters, which was trying to capacitate people in understanding their smart meters, to do-it-yourself workshops for installing photovoltaics, which were explaining to people what are the benefits of renewable energy. We also did series of do-it-yourself workshops for simple energy and water saving measures, where people learned how to do simple tricks at home. The final approach was conducting health workshops. Here we had two different kinds of workshops. One was working directly with people affected by energy poverty. This type of workshop was working with a therapist who was helping the group to unburden from their mental issues that were created by facing energy poverty. The second type of health workshops was conducted with frontline health stuff, whereby, for example, nurses that are visiting people at homes were trained in what is energy poverty, what are the first 8 sort of approaches to tackle it, and what are the other programs that they can appoint people to tackle their energy poverty. In these practical activities for tackling energy poverty, we involved directly over 2,500 women, and we assessed that overall we impacted over 9,000 people with these practical activities to reduce energy poverty. In a way to involve women, we focused on several approaches that were designed especially for attracting women. One thing that we did was gender training for partners, so that all of the partners of the project would be on the same level regarding the gender issues and communication with focus on gender and so on. Then we did design our communication in a way that is friendly to women. Like, for example, in languages where we have 2 different forms for men and women, we're using the women's form only or the women's form first. We used women-oriented channels for communication, such as single mothers clubs or women's sports clubs and so on. We also did gender disaggregated indicators, so we collected data in a disaggregated manner to have the indicators for men and women in the project, and we also paid attention to gender equality policies when designing our policy recommendations on the project. If you have questions, you can find my contacts on the Focus website, and otherwise you can find more information about the project on www.empowermet.eu. So please feel welcome to use the resources of the project. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lydia. That was pretty impressive as far as how many key actors it mobilized to tackle energy poverty, which I think is yet another proof point that you can leverage on each other's expertise and resources. If you have that common vision against common values, you can expand the scale and scope of your efforts. I mean, of course, on the operational level, it could be pretty challenging, you know, so many people involved. But if you have that set of values, that makes a much clearer roadmap to get there. I want to speak to, I guess, evidence on the health consequences of climate change, both from the physical and mental health side of things, such as we we're familiar with the term eco-anxiety, which is this kind of chronic fear of the environmental doom. What does IGA's evidence tell us about the health consequences and implications of climate change?
It's true, there is more and more evidence mounting of the sort of health effects of a warming climate. Even in the EU, it's really not so much of a distant phenomenon anymore. It's really affecting us more and more, and we see this every summer. There was a study coming out recently showing that in the summer of 2022, in Europe at large, not only the EU, over 62,000 people died as a result of extreme heat. This is happening now. So this is a very, very, of course, this a very extreme case of people losing their lives out of it. But and most of the people were older than 80, and women were really a big part of that group. So. And of course, energy poverty is a part of that. If you're unable to cool down your home or to go to some places where you can really feel a bit cooler, health effects are really can be dramatic.
Yeah, and if we also talk about mental health, for example, if we see this is, for example, on people live in lower quality dwellings, you can see that's really also about social exclusion. If people have an uncomfortable living position, an uncomfortable living place, then it becomes also more of a mental health struggle in the sense that it's people cannot invite people into their house or uncomfortable to do so, and it becomes also a matter of social exclusion. And that's why it was also very, very good to hear mentioned being the intersection of age and gender, because that's very much, as Blandine mentioned, very much also the population that is affected by climate-related temperature risings. And so it's a very big part, energy poverty, both for physical health, living in drafty dwellings, or also for mental health, suffering from social exclusion, but also when looking at the concept of hidden energy poverty, feelings of shame to not be able to take care of family, but also of yourself, of course. So it's a big part of this issue as well.
I think another key point to remind ourselves is that energy poverty is not just the preserve of winter. I think it's held this kind of this misconception now, but it doesn't discriminate the seasons anymore. I mean, the impact is all year round. So now let's get down to business quite literally. I want to bring in Agnieszka. If you're here, I imagine that you are. Let's start by looking at what you do. You are a practitioner in the energy, social and industrial transition, which also sounds like a revolution. Can you speak to me and us about what that looks like, and can you give us examples of how these aspects connect and form the transition at large in your work?
Yes, of course. So basically, I'm in the region where the coal mine is based. So the Turów coal mine that was the issue for the conflict in between Poland and Czech Republic. Also now there is another problem with the German side. So we are on a three-border region that is actually very, very much influenced by the presence of the mine and power plants. So when we started our first steps in making energy community, creating energy community that is now one of the biggest in Poland. We didn't realize back then that it also is about social and industrial transition. So what is extremely important is to include inhabitants, inhabitants who also were not asked before if they want or not to participate in the coal-based energy sector, but they were just living in the place. what we have to do is to include them in the process. So tell them what is the energy transition, what will happen to their job places, what will happen to their lives and to the lives of their children. So we not only build solar panels installations or wind installations. We also educate, and we also try to ask investors to come and invest in the industries that were not possible to be here before.
Can you walk and talk us through where you see the most changes in the renewable energy sector where women are concerned?
Yeah, so energy sector, coal-based energy sector is mainly masculine thing. Yeah, right. So I can tell that 99, even probably 9% of workers in the old energy sector are men. There are miners, but they're also they're specialists in the power plants, and women are totally not not included in the processes. They can be secretaries or assistants in the offices, but not working with the critical installations. So there is a huge change, because for the new energy that is regarded to be clean energy, not only in the matter of being renewable, but also not a very physically tough way of gaining this energy. So now there is a place for women. So I can see more and more women. They are mainly they are either young engineers who already knew what the energy transition will be about, and they decided to become engineers in hydrogen or in green energy, because they can see their job opportunities in there. But also I can see lots of good project managers and also designers who are in this transition. And also we can see women who are working with investments, so more and more appear there. The only thing that unfortunately I observe is that the main that if you look at for example members board, or even in this renewable sector, most are men, and it's both within the private business and with the public state-owned companies.
And so when it comes to onboarding more women in the renewable energy sector, it's one thing to sort of enter, it's another thing to sort of stay. Can you give examples of some of the mentoring schemes in support of retaining women?
Yes. So firstly, very important thing is that if we start education with the women, we can show them their chance for making a living. Yes. So these are the things that are appearing, and now I think that women are more and more aware of it. On the other hand, it's somewhere probably in the heads of the management boards of the people working in the energy sector that women should not really take care of energy. So we have to change the people's minds mostly. So I can give many examples of places that I'm the only woman, for example, on the in the room, and then you can feel yourself not very comfortable. So also we have this in mind that if you are a woman in the energy sector, you might be treated not very politely. This is the first thing, and also men usually don't take you seriously. So they think, okay, so what can the blondie say? Yeah. So it's really not very unpleasant way of the things that I can hear for every day. Yeah.
We actually have a really pertinent audience question off the back of what you just said. Do you find it easy to find allies, especially from your male colleagues?
Basically, yes. Basically, yes, but it's mostly these who work in this renewable sector. So in the modern, way of thinking, they also modernize their way of treating women. So if I look at the hydrogen sector, if I look at the renewable sector, it's better and better. However, when I meet groups from coal-based energy sector, I can't say that I have friends there. So every time, I'm not treated seriously there, and this is like the division in between two sectors. So there is this sector that accepts gender equality, and the sector that totally does not. So this coal-based energy sector, I have even no idea how to make them behave differently and start thinking differently.
Well, as ever, to use an overused phrase, much to be done, lots for improvement, and the work is a work in progress, as always. Thank you very much, Agnieszka. Now we have another promising practice and another interlude from Carmen Sanchez Guevara, who is a lecturer at the School of Architecture from the Technical University of Madrid. She's going to present a project called Cool to Rise, which has a gender-sensitive approach to actioning energy poverty solutions. Let's take a look.
Hello, I'm Carmen Sanchez Guevara. I'm a lecturer at the School of Architecture in the Technical University of Madrid, and I want to thank the European Institute for Gender Equality for inviting me to present how we have included a gender-sensitive approach when we've delivered some energy poverty actions in the project Cool to Rise, which is an H2020 project we coordinate from our university, and this is the first European funded project specifically focused on summer energy poverty. We designed a strategy of incorporating children in the activities so we can facilitate women to participate in them. I'm going to explain you why and how we made it. First, our experience on measuring the feminization of energy poverty in Madrid. Here you have a link to download the study if you want. It's in Spanish and English. What we checked when we measured the percentage of households living under energy poverty, when we took a look at the general population, we saw that the 23% of households of Madrid were at risk of energy poverty. However, when we took a look at those households headed by women, this percentage went up to the 28%. Besides their situation, we checked there was a huge segregation of capabilities according to gender roles, because women, they are generally socialized into general dynamics that do not include experimentation with technology, which detracts them from their independence in dealing with everyday situations related to energy equipment, let's say dealing with the boiler, with the radiators. Also, we needed to cover these necessities, but in many cases, they felt helpless because they were not able to attend to specific workshops and trainings to change this situation. So that's why in Cool to Rise project, we designed a strategy to facilitate women to participate in this workshop. What have been the main key findings of the work we've done? Well, first, that feminization of energy poverty is a phenomenon, and it, as it says there, it can be reversed not only through the design of public policies and the improvement of databases. We know there's a lot of work being done on that, but also by providing tools and training so that these women can improve their situation to cope with energy poverty. Also, there's a strong correlation between the caregivers and the problem of the feminization of energy poverty, and it requires a specific design of resources to accompany this care. For example, these toy libraries. These toy libraries can be useful to work with children, but don't forget the main idea is to incorporate women and facilitate the participation into these workshops. And also we've checked, even though we offer these workshops, these playgrounds always in parallel to our workshops, we've also checked that having this gender sensitive approach, if you offer women, because in many cases they do not want to leave their babies because they're very little, if you facilitate them to keep their babies while the workshop, and you don't see the baby as something strange within the workshop, or also if you plan the workshops during hours that are compatible with caregiving tasks. This is important, for example, not only for the training, but also in energy renovation processes, because generally meetings with neighbors are at 7 in the afternoon, at 8, and you know what happened at this time within the houses, which is the hours to give dinners, etc. So including this sensitiveness means all these efforts and all these things. So thank you very much, and here you have the contact of the research group and myself if you want to if you have any doubt and you need anything else. Thank you very much, and bye.
Thank you very much, Carmen. I think if we are going to become fluent in energy solutions, the best way is to learn by doing. I want to look into another overarching area that Carmen brought up in this initiative, a topic that's really close to Aige's work, and that is on unpaid care. I love that this workshop builds around a kind of 2-in-1 kind of flexible option where you can learn and also bring your children at the same time. And given that Aige has a time use survey on unpaid care and social and individual activities, why is this such an important component in the energy transition?
Yes, absolutely. This survey that you just mentioned has helped us feel a really important data gap, especially in the way we have computed our domain of time, because the data we had was from 7 years ago, and thankfully things have improved in 7 years. Maybe not as much as we would like, but what do we see with this new data is that the gaps between women and men in terms of how engaged they are in caring for children, caring for people with disabilities and elderly, are still very high. They are the highest in housework. So this is something that is still a reality for most of families in the EU. And what we also find is that the arrival of children is something that really changes the deal in terms of distribution of unpaid care. So we see that the gender gaps are much smaller in people in couple without children. So I think it is very, very relevant when designing workshops or any sort of consultations that targets women to really keep in mind the burden of unpaid care that falls to them disproportionately, especially if they have young children, because this intensity of care is still very much there. And this is something that hasn't yet changed and still needs to be really tackled.
Now, before we bring the webinar to a close, I want to put out a question to everybody here, leaning in on energy poverty, because it's been a topic of much talk for many decades, but now more than ever, I think. And I want to know from anybody here, has this kind of increased understanding influenced maintaining a gender perspective in tackling energy poverty? Juliana, are you smiling? Can I ask you, can I look to you for this?
Yes, sure.
Go ahead.
Well, yes, I think in general, yes, and I think we have seen the gender mainstreaming across policies, not only in the environment and the climate, but also in social. So there is a need to mainstream the needs of women, girls, family led by women in this perspective. But what we don't see in the same level of progress is the understanding around poverty. It was interesting to hear before from the previous examples that we are talking about the question of how we can make sure that projects and initiatives can alleviate poverty. For us as APN, this is a concern because we should not be talking about alleviation of poverty. We should be talking about eradication of poverty. We should not be measuring the target on the bottom. We should be targeting the targets on the top. So just to give you an example, by 2021, when the Commission set the targets for the poverty line, how many people should be out of poverty by 2021, they did not achieve the target of 15 million. So instead of increase their resources and increasing the tools and the policies to make sure that people could be eradicated out of poverty, what was done, in fact, was to change the target, not to change the measure. So if in one perspective, we're going to see some changes and some progression on gender policies, on the other side, we see a lack of profound understanding of the multidimensions of gender. It was really interesting to talk about the unpaid care, and when you're talking about also income, resources, wages, we should also be talking about social protections as a mechanism to eradicate people out of the poverty line, to eradicate women at risk of energy poverty. Just to give you an example, with the new minimum scheme council recommendation, this is a really good progress. However, the questions of non-pay cap, so which are the conditions, which are the barriers that women face to not access extra support for income to really eradicate poverty, well, these rates are very high. In countries like Spain, you have the rate of non-pay cap of 57%. And if you go through the gender lenses and try to see how this is impacting women, the proportions will be much higher. So it would be great also if we're talking about the policies, but also the results of this policy as, let's say, a perspective of impact.
Thank you, Juliana. We actually have Annabelle who's nodding along really enthusiastically. Please bring in your focus.
Yes, of course, and thank you, Juliana, as well. And if we're talking about results of policy, we cannot talk about not diagnosing the problem. So we need to improve our understanding of the EU-wide problem of energy poverty and also focus in data collection on gender inequalities and intersecting inequalities. We need to understand who is most like which vulnerable consumers are we talking about. Also, and that's why I was also very pleased with having the example of Carmen. We need to include a care perspective because we can't talk about gender equality without talking about unpaid care responsibilities. And of course, these things, when we're talking about a problem, when we're looking at who is most impacted, who is most at risk, we need to have this seen also in measures and policies that would address energy poverty, because energy poverty is not a gender neutral problem, and neither is it neutral from a perspective of intersecting inequalities.
Thank you so much. I think now that we've come towards the end of the webinar and we've really scoped out that nexus between gender and energy. I want to leave on a forward-looking and practical note by asking each of you to identify a commitment for a green and gender equal energy transition that you would like to see actioned by the powers that be, as it were. What else needs to be done to improve the gender perspective in energy poverty as part of the energy transition, or further afield? But I think we've been really focusing our literal energies on the energy poverty aspect of it. So let's start off with our external experts. Agnieszka, let's start with you. What would your one commitment be? Or let's say it in terms of the 3 steps forward, but each of you give 1 step, because we don't have time for 3 steps from each of you. But go ahead. What would your one priority commitment be?
So I think that the highest priority would be to remind all actually employees in the energy sector that women are equal and they are able to to work equally with energy sector. So I don't know, maybe something like stick notes on the walls or on the door reminding that we should be treated equally. So that's mainly the thing that we have to remind, because it's very often that things go too far in even talking every day, chit chats, etc. So these things might support me feeling better in this masculine world.
Talk, I hear you. Thank you so much. Miguel.
Yes, I would say that we really need to strive for gender balance when we are planning these either national or local support schemes for energy poverty, and really go to the root of the problem of the bad design of these mechanisms that then do not reach the people that are intended to reach. So include women from the beginning of the planning stages, and also to the impact, as Juliana said, when we measure impact, to really look at what resulted and what can be improved for the next phases.
Thank you. Juliana, go ahead.
Well, I think for us, there are 2 key messages. First of all, that we should ensure the access to affordable clean energy as a human right, but also to ensure there is equal participation for women in low carbon economy. This should not be a privilege only for the few. So I think this is a key message number 1. And message number 2 is a little bit more radical, but why not? Because I'm here to also represent the voice of people experiencing poverty. Ban on all disconnections. Women are suffering the plans, the schemes of disconnection, because they cannot afford to pay their electricity bill. We should ban that and maintain regulated prices until the end of the crisis.
Juliana, now into the studio space here. Blondine.
Well, I think those are really, really important priorities, and I would love to see them all implemented like now, immediately. I also want to mention that we have a new climate commissioner at the EU level, and I would really love to see some very dynamic, very concrete commitment from him in terms of the need for the transition to be gender equal, and the representation of women at every level of the green transition to be absolutely fundamental. There's lots of really promising initiatives going on. For example, the International Energy Agency has developed this initiative called Equal by 30 to accelerate gender equality in the green transition in terms of energy. So this is something that we want to see a little bit expanded, and more countries, more institutions to take very concrete pledges to do their share.
Well, of course, I agree with Blondine on that one. And also, if I can then add something more, the representation both in the labor force and in decision making, and of course, taking into account for the energy transition policies, unpaid care responsibility and unpaid care work, and of course, an integral gender perspective in policy. So how will policies on energy-related topics impact gender equality? It's very important to know that and to act upon it.
Well, from your lips to everybody's ears, your commitments are very clear, coherent, and very action-oriented, which is what we need to take those next steps forward. Thank you so much to our external experts, to our internal experts for the work that you do, for your commitment to the cause, and for the amazing insights that you've brought here with us today. So, and also thank you to everybody who's been watching. This is the end of our webinar series. You can watch both of the episodes on our YouTube channel from now until next year, where I hope we can do this again. This has been really fun. Thank you so much, and until then, take care.